Good morning, everyone. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a misconception about awakening. I think there's the belief out there that once you realize your true nature, once you wake up to the illusion of me, that that's the end of it. Life will be wonderful. A never-ending series of blissful moments. Let me tell you something. uh, if you believe that, then you are mistaken. But that's okay. Because part of the post-awakening process, in fact, the real work is in the post-awakening process. Because it's in the post-awakening process that our conditioned patterns can be seen. And the more that they are seen, the more that they dissipate. They just don't go away. There are years and years and years of conditioning, decades of conditioning for many of us that go back to childhood and even before childhood. Especially when we learn about the recent evidence of epigenetics that shows that our parents' experiences and their parents' experiences and their parents before them somehow get genetically encoded. And we are really sort of living out the sins of our father, as the saying goes, but really kind of the experiences of our ancestors. So there's genetic influences, there's epigenetic influences, there's environmental influences, the things that we've been taught growing up. In Zen, which has comprised a lot of my training, is particularly the lineage of that I was in, the White Plum lineage. I worked with John Daido Roshi Lori for a while, and then Rain Campo Callis for a while. Koans were utilized extensively. Now, there are a set of koans that are called awakening koans or enlightenment koans. One example of that is what was your original face? Or another version of that is what was your original face before you were born? Another enlightenment koan is a very popular one called Mu. A monk asked Joshu was a famous Zen master, a monk asked Joshu, does a dog have the Buddha nature or not? And Joshu answered, Mu. Mu translates directly as no. In fact, there's another koan that a monk asked Joshu, does a dog have the Buddha nature? And Joshu answered, yes. But it is the koan in which he answered no that many students receive as their very first koan. And in Zen practice, you often get opportunities to sit face-to-face with a teacher in what's called Daisan or Dokusan. It's interview, face-to-face interview. You present your koan, and then the teacher sits there and kind of waits for you to provide an answer that comes from the ground of being, comes from your spiritual eye, so to speak, and not from your mind. And then the teacher will probe, depending upon the kind of answer that you provide. The thing I wanted to bring up, though, is these awakening koans, these enlightenment koans, are typically what students receive at the very beginning. Once those koans are passed, once one's true nature is seen and realized, then the real work begins. Because in the Zen tradition, at least in the Rinzai or blended Rinzai traditions, a student might receive hundreds, possibly thousands of koans. Well, what's the point of those koans? It's all part of the clearing out process. each koan that is provided gives the student and the teacher the opportunity to assess how clear, how free the student is to respond given the koan. What that demonstrates is the extent to which a student is able to freely respond in any circumstance, under any conditions, at any time. In non-duality, it is often discussed that first there's awakening, and then there's clearing. And then after clearing, there's embodying, which is kind of the returning back into living one's life. But now from the perspective of being much clearer than one was previously. In fact, clearing and embodying kind of go together. The more one clears, the more one starts to embody their understanding, so to speak. It's not a logical understanding, and yet it's a knowing of your true nature. It's a seeing through the patterns and conditioning. Now, the reason why I bring this up is, well, one of the things that I really appreciate with my teacher, Fred Davis, is he's just totally out there. You know, as a Zen student, for the longest time, we really wouldn't hear anything from the Zen teachers that was of a personal nature. They never really talked about their own enlightenment experiences. They never really talked about their own difficulties. And I understand why, because they didn't want to give students another story for them to hold on to and to grasp, because that's our tendency. That's the mind's tendency. Oh, look, this teacher struggled with waking up, or this teacher struggled with certain clearing patterns. So I understand why Zen teachers traditionally did not get up close and personal in that sense. They did not share, but they were more interested in, where are you coming from? And I see that with some non-dual teachers as well. It's rare that you hear personal stories. Fred Davis is different. I mean, he's just out there and he talks about his own struggles, both before awakening and after awakening. Well, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up in part, and I'm cutting this video in part, not just to talk to you guys about this, but also as a reminder to this unit, because it's still very easy to get caught up in a conditioned pattern. And this happened over here over the past week. I'm not going to get into the specific circumstances, but things were occurring here that triggered a re-identification back into this unit, and a re-identification with a particular storyline. And it took some really deep investigation and lots of sitting to kind of take a look and see, wow, first of all, wow, look what happened. And then, what's going on? Now, that doesn't mean you analyze it like you would, say, in psychotherapy. You're not trying to figure out why, but obviously there's an energy pattern that's going on. That energy pattern is that re-identification or identification with a particular storyline that hasn't been completely seen through. And in this case, it took some work. And I'm still not sure whether it's cleared out or not. In fact, I know it's not entirely cleared out because I still feel a residual energetic emotional pattern, a constriction in my chest, sometimes a little knot in my stomach. The two sometimes go hand in hand, but this is mostly a constriction in my chest. And so the point is that bliss is not an automatic thing. What we need to do is we need to be vigilant. We really need to take the time to identify and see where we're stuck. Because if you're having an emotional reaction to something, you're stuck. You're re-identifying with a story, a thought, a belief system. Things that trigger us are areas of attachment. And the thing is not to repress them or avoid them. To do so will only perpetuate the story. And so maybe the situation might change and you'll start to feel better until the next time something similar happens and you have an emotional reaction. And this is part of the misconception that these things don't happen. Well, they do. And it happened here. From the perspective of the character, I didn't like the fact that it happened here. In fact, because of it, I wasn't really in the mood for even cutting this video. But as I said, I'm doing this not just to talk about my experiences, but also as a reminder over here, to not stop persisting in clearing up. And to remind you that it's going to happen. And it's okay when it happens. It is. Because it's what happens. It's what's happening. So you might be experiencing some emotional constriction. Don't go into, well, it shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening? It's happening. Accept it. But look at it. Sit with it. Meditate with it. Quietly place your attention on the feelings of constriction. Because sometimes when you put your attention where the constriction is, you might start to unravel, or you might start to see what the storyline is. That's what happened over here. I started seeing how far back and how far deeply the storyline is embedded. It really does go back to childhood. The issue I'm talking about in generally had to do with money. And I know my parents fought over money all the time when we were kids. I say we because I have two brothers. Constantly fought, and it was stressful. It was just a point of contention in the marriage, and it spilled over to the family and as young kids, But then to sit here 60 years later and realize that, man, those arguments and those fights and that tension still exists here. And it is led to the adoption and identification of a set of beliefs having to do with money. And it's still felt. It's there. It's still there. Not as strong as it was a few days ago, which means but the fact that it's still there means it's still worthy of investigation, because you have to be open and honest with yourself. You need to do that first. If you're feeling constriction, if you're feeling stuck, you have to accept that you are. Don't run from it. And then look at it. And there's two ways to look at it. So let me sort of close with a couple of different ways of doing this. I mentioned one, which is kind of look at the energy pattern. But perhaps even before that, take a step back. Place your attention on attention itself. Notice the sense of being. Notice that you're aware of being aware. Allow attention, awareness to rest as awareness. Because that's who you are. That's actually probably the best advice, is to put your attention there. Now, if the feeling continues to arise, then allow it. Notice, though, that you're aware of the feeling, so the feeling isn't you. There might be a storyline behind the emotion or the feeling. Notice, if you do notice the storyline, just keep in mind by resting as awareness that the belief, the storyline, isn't you. But it's okay to accept that you have re-identified with that storyline. And so the process really is one of mindfulness. Be mindful of that open, spacious, boundless awareness that you already are. And don't resist what's arising. Let it arise. Don't berate yourself for it. Don't get down on yourself for it. Don't wish it could be any other way. Just let it arise. Over time, the energy will dissipate. But be mindful, pay attention. Again, maybe a thought might arise. You might ask yourself, is that thought true? Are you the thought? Who's having the thought? Ah, who's having the thought? Hmm? Who's aware of the thought? If you're aware of the thought, can the thought be you? Now, this doesn't mean that the identification will go away immediately. It depends on how deeply embedded it is. It might take a while. But this is part of the post-awakening process. And so I wanted to share this. There's still a lot of humanity left in this bag of skin. A lot. Yeah. A lot of conditioned patterns still here. But that doesn't mean that true nature has not been seen. And that's kind of the point of all this. Awakening is actually easy, even though it appears and seems and has been for many people very difficult. It doesn't have to be. It seems like more and more there's individuals who are finding more direct methods of, of assisting people to realize their true nature. And if you haven't yet realized your true nature, if you haven't yet awakened, seek someone else. I highly recommend Fred Davis. He seems to be the go-to guy these days. Seek me out. Be happy to work you through some of the processes as well. Or seek others out. But if you are in the post-awakening process, give yourself a break. Just give yourself a break. But be vigilant. Watch out. So I'll close with a nice little storyline. There's a story of a Zen master who every morning used to climb the hill behind his monastery and call out, "Master, are you there?" And he would then answer in return, "Yes, I am." And then he would say, "Do not be deceived by anyone? And he would then answer, no, I won't. And that, do not be deceived by anyone really saying, don't deceive yourself. Don't deceive yourself. Thank you for listening.